At the end of 2007, Crysis came out and tried to take PC gaming to the next level. Ultra-insane graphics, revolutionary physics engine, and some of the most impressive set pieces in gaming yet were supposed to create the best game ever, but hilariously poorly written story, lacking gameplay variety, one of the worst levels in all of gaming history, and especially the astronomical hardware requirements left a lot to be desired. Instead of becoming the king of kings in gaming, Crysis is remembered as barely more than a glorified benchmark to test latest and greatest tech, and all the legacy it created was spawning "can it run Crysis" meme applied to every high requirement game for years to come. It was the brightest title in the gaming sky for a brief moment, but it burnt out almost immediately, and a year later we got Crysis Warhead. This time, there wasn't as much hype, it wasn't hailed as the best gaming experience in history, it wasn't supposed to be a revolution, but it was supposed to look better, run smoother, and fix everything wrong with Crysis. But did it manage to do that? Let's investigate. Crysis Warhead is basically the story of Psycho and his adventures after leaving Nomad at the end of Assault. After Nomad painted the Korean cruiser, and it was destroyed by US air assault, Idaho Company got dropped off nearby, and while Nomad went to participate in by far the best Crysis level, the Onslaught, Psycho got reassigned to different part of the island to deal with a different threat. It's actually unclear what Psycho's mission is, since he gets assigned a different task later, but for the time being, Psycho joins a US vehicle convoy driving through the jungle and defends it as it is attacked by North Korean soldiers. We get a pre-rendered cutscene of Psycho using his suit like some 80s action movie Rambo-type hero, jumping around, punching and shooting enemies left, right, and center. This doesn't last long though, and the convoy is destroyed by some Korean general who's trying to look tougher than he actually is. So Psycho and the Marines are forced to defend themselves, fighting into the night. The VTOL transport is dispatched and tries to evacuate Psycho and Marines from the destroyed convoy, but is hit by a missile and crash lands into the jungle below. As far as game intros go, this one is pretty badass. It's let down massively by the fact all of this is just pre-rendered low-resolution cutscene, rather than actual gameplay like it was in the original Crysis, but the intensity of the action somewhat makes up for that. It feels like you're just watching a supercut of a badass, but charmingly cheesy retro action movie. This is also where the game actually starts. Psycho awakes in the middle of a fight between Marines from the crashed airship and Korean forces in the jungle, and gets rallied to rendezvous point on a nearby ridge, but gets hit by an unexpected EMP blast from a strange container and gets knocked out. Psycho becomes conscious again just in time to see the container being lifted away by a Korean helicopter. Whatever was in the container left the surrounding area frozen, and Psycho gets flashbacks to the frozen ship he and the rest of Raptor team encountered at the start of Crysis. Psycho now has some suspicions on what was in the container, but is contacted by Central Command and gets assigned a different objective. Sierra team is about to conduct air strikes on the island and need Psycho to act as ground support. It also turns out Psycho's old friend Sean O'Neill is on the Sierra team as a jet pilot, and they've had some history back in the day, but at this point it's not yet explained. The only thing we know is that O'Neill has some kind of disdain for Raptor team. Sierra team is ordered to bomb Korean encampment on a nearby beach, with Psycho assigned to clear out Koreans on the ground. O'Neill is ordered to support Psycho from the air, which he is not too happy about, but is forced to do so by the G.Skill command. Clearing out Koreans in local area, Psycho also manages to gather some intel on Colonel Lee, the same one who destroyed his convoy in the jungle. As it turns out, Lee requested a special delivery from a nuclear research site, and G.Skill command believes that delivery actually was a nuclear warhead, and that Lee is intending to detonate that warhead on the island. Proceeding further to the Korean beach encampment, Psycho is passed by another Korean helicopter carrying a nuclear weapon container, and this time, he is assigned to follow and recover the container after finishing the beach massacre. The beach fight is actually one of the better fight arenas in the game. It's open but has lots of cover. The central island has plenty of guns and explosives, and there's an abundance of targets for Psycho to shoot at. It's incredibly fun, extremely enjoyable, and the arena design is excellent. Psycho easily destroys all the enemy forces around here. However, before he can catch up to Korean helicopter, O'Neill is shot down by enemy jet fighters and crashes into the jungle. Before he crashed, his plane camera managed to capture a few images from a nearby Korean dock where they're loading the nuclear container onto a ship. At the same time, Korean forces are moving to O'Neill's crash location. He survived the crash, but is alone with just a pistol against multiple KPA soldiers and has almost no hope of survival. G.Skill command press Psycho to intercept the nuclear container on the dock, but Psycho chooses to save O'Neill first, earning his respect. It turns out O'Neill was supposed to be a part of Raptor team and have his own nanosuit, but he screwed up in training and got assigned elsewhere, with Nomad taking his place on the team. Hence why he feels strong disdain for Raptor team. But Psycho's decision to ignore direct orders from G.Skill and save him instead, despite knowing he's going to get into some massive heat over disobedience, makes O'Neill change his opinion of Psycho and the rest of the nanosuit team. After rescuing O'Neill, Psycho scouts out the Korean dock and decides to assault it, but O'Neill needs evacuation. Both of them drive to Rally Point, where Allied VTOL is supposed to pick up O'Neill, but the Korean resistance is so heavy, VTOL gets damaged and its pilot is seriously injured. It sets down further on the island, and Psycho along with O'Neill have to battle their way to it. Koreans throw soldiers, cars, helicopters, and literally everything else at them. But Psycho manages to crash through all of the obstacles, escorting O'Neill and destroying everything in their path. This whole journey from the beach to the crash site is easily one of the most intense moments in any Crysis game, and is glorious. Chaos all around, explosions of barrels, vehicles, and entire houses paint the road with flashes of light, and shower with debris, and unrelenting KPA forces make it a supremely enjoyable and entertaining mission. It also helps that in Warhead vehicles feel much better than in original Crysis, and we get to drive stuff like armored transport with unlimited heavy machine gun ammo, which is one of the deadliest vehicles in any Crysis games. It's slow, but man is it powerful. This is also where Crysis physics engine shines, with buildings getting blown up, debris flying everywhere, and enemy vehicles flipping and tumbling when shot or exploded. While it's not exactly realistic, it's incredibly satisfying and enjoyable, and this whole level is truly awesome, easily one of the best levels in the entire Crysis franchise. At the site of downed VTOL, Allied soldiers are besieged by Korean forces, and Psycho helps defend against several waves of KPA before O'Neill can fly the VTOL out. This is one of few defense sections in Warhead, and probably is the best one. Adrenaline is still pumping from that road trip we just took. Action is at fever pitch with KPA forces assaulting on all sides, and we get to enjoy sniper rifle and plenty of targets for it. An excellent mission indeed. After KPA forces are defeated and O'Neill flies the VTOL away, Psycho proceeds towards the KPA dock. This is where we're presented by something that was sorely needed in the first Crysis: options. In the original game, despite nanosuit having invisibility and weapons having silencers, the approach was almost always the same: go in guns blazing. Alternate routes were often cut off by cliffs, walls, minefields, or other obstacles, leaving only one actual path through. In Warhead, this issue is at least partially fixed. For example, the KPA dock. You can follow the road straight to the dock and assault it directly, or you can stealth your way over a nearby waterfall, jump down to small swamp covered by trees, bushes, and other cover, sneak in closer to the base either by avoiding enemies with invisibility or just by keeping your distance, then infiltrate the compound by jumping the fence off of a rock or going in through a hole in the fence. You can kill every enemy you meet, or you can choose to stay at least partially hidden and just stealth your way towards the objective. Of course, eventually you end up shooting your way through regardless, especially since this base has a grenade launcher available, as well as mines, explosives, and a whole arsenal of firearms. But at least you've got the stealth option available to a point, so the gameplay is already more varied than in the original Crysis, even if just by a little. After all, there are limits to how varied you can make gameplay when the game is mostly linear high-action shooter created to display cutting-edge graphics and physics engines. Dock Assault itself is also pretty awesome, regardless of what approach you take. Abundance of enemies, large variety of available weapons, and especially the grenade launcher turn what could have been just another base into a truly fun and enjoyable fiesta of chaos and explosions. O'Neill also provides limited air support, so Psycho isn't alone on the battlefield like Nomad was for the majority of the game. This whole section takes only a couple of minutes, but those minutes are really fun. But the whole point of assaulting the dock is to gain access to the Korean submarine carrying the Warhead container. So Psycho gets in and finds out that it's not a Warhead Koreans are carrying, but rather an inactive Ceph alien. frozen inside of the container. It's clear writers were trying to create an amazing plot twist, but we've already seen Seth in Crysis, and Psycho brought this very one at the end of the original game, so this plot twist does nothing, as it already has been spoiled in the previous game. Anyway, Psycho gets zapped by EMP blast again and is knocked out, which is a common theme for him. Seriously. We're like an hour into the game, but Psycho has already been knocked out 3 times, which is a lot for a super elite soldier with uber mega cool nanosuit. Anyway, when he awakens, he finds himself captured by Colonel Lee and his soldiers. Psycho spits out some British humor.
I'm British, Muppet. Muppet? Idiot.
Followed by Lee torturing Psycho to assert dominance and prove everyone he's the main bad guy of the game. This goes nowhere though, because in typical bad guy fashion, Lee goes away, leaving his soldiers to deal with Psycho. But before they can kill him, on the other side of the island, Nomad triggers alien machinery in the mountain, and the flash freeze kills Korean soldiers. Psycho survives because of his nanosuit, but must now chase Colonel Lee and the alien container. This sudden switch from tropical paradise island to frozen hell is actually quite jarring and comes with quite a bit higher load on the computer, but it looks real good and quite a bit more impressive than in the original game. Alien spikes rise up from the ground, lakes and rivers are completely frozen over, and there are glaciers and ice mountains everywhere. All of this makes scenery in Warhead considerably more impressive and visually appealing. It looks like an actual alien landscape as opposed to a regular human island, just covered with a thin layer of snow like it was in Crysis. An excellent change of pace. This is also where the first major difficulty spike happens, because regular soldiers can't survive the cold. Almost all enemies for quite a large part of the game from now on are super soldiers with nanosuits. They're much harder to kill, can dish out much more damage, and are in general a significant increase in difficulty. Ceph aliens also appear in this level, and they're significantly improved this time around. Now they don't just spawn far away in the air, they break through the ice from the ground, erupting with shards of ice and snow flying everywhere, and they're much harder to kill as they seem to have much more health this time around, taking 5 Gauss shots to down instead of 2 like before, and they do feel like an actual threat this time. In Crysis, these particular aliens were only encountered either in scripted missions where they were ultra aggressive towards Nomad, or during massive battles with multiple NPCs present, and thus were only focusing on Nomad rarely. In Warhead, they attack everyone all the time. Koreans do fight them, but these aliens also attack Psycho even when he's not directly in the line of fire, and they actively try to end your existence all the time. We're also introduced to the hovercraft, which is another new addition to Crysis vehicles. It's fast and agile, and actually quite fun to drive. Its controls aren't perfect, but it's a massive improvement over any vehicle in the original game, except for the tank. Entering the hovercraft, Psycho gives chase to Colonel Lee, who's in a hovercraft of his own, trying to escape with the Ceph alien container. This is yet another awesome action scene. The chase is fun, entertaining, and completely full of action. Koreans, Ceph aliens, exploding buildings, alien exosuit, jumps and ramps. This chase has everything. It's easily one of the best action set pieces in the franchise, even if you're not actually doing much, just driving. The overall chaos and adrenaline-fueled blood-pumping action is spectacular, and it really creates a feeling of grand events unraveling. The chase is awesome, and it's just long enough to allow you to fully experience and enjoy the hovercraft, but it ends just before it gets boring. Truly incredible mission design, and clear sign Crytek learned a lot about mission length and pacing since the original game. Shortly after chase ends, Psycho joins Eagle Team, another team of nanosuit soldiers deployed to the islands. It wasn't really mentioned in original Crysis, but Raptor Team wasn't the only super soldier unit. Eagle Team is equally badass, just not as significant as Raptor Team was. Psycho and Eagle Team fight together through Korean forces and Ceph Assault, and it's fun as hell. It's the first time in the franchise we actually get to freely fight alongside other nano soldiers, as in original Crysis most they ever did was run alongside Nomad between cutscenes or participate in extremely short scripted defense sequences. While it's not exactly super special, it's still really fun to see other people, equally as capable as Psycho, kick some serious ass. Ally AI was clearly improved since the first game, as these Eagle Team soldiers are actually capable of not not only fighting the enemy, but also do so pretty effectively. Sure, most of the frags still come from Psycho, but Eagle Team actively engage and destroy multiple targets on their own. This is easily the best team fight mission since Onslaught and Crysis, and just knowing you're not alone in the field, even if your companions are AI, and in most cases are far from perfect, really makes the mission significantly more enjoyable. This mission itself is pretty spectacular. Fighting aliens and KPA forces, Psycho and Eagle Team make their way across frozen jungle paradise down to the foot of Alien Mountain, which Nomad just escaped from. And it's really fun to see the other side of the events, especially if you've played Crysis and know the story. While you're exterminating enemies here, on the other side of the mountain, Nomad and Prophet are fighting for survival in bone-chilling cold under assault from hordes of aliens. It really adds to the feeling of global escalation. Of course, it's better not to think about the plot inaccuracies that Warhead introduces, especially in this mission, like the fact Nomad exited Alien Mountain and like an hour later was already on the aircraft carrier at sea with both Prophet and Psycho. But in Warhead, Psycho, who is supposed to be on an aircraft carrier in like an hour, still has good half of the entire game left to beat and lots of ground to cover. But let's not think about that, because we've actually got a boss fight now. That's right, at the end of this level we actually get to fight and kill an alien exosuit. While another one of these is chasing Nomad on the other side of the mountain, Psycho and Eagle Team are actually badass enough to destroy this one here. And not only that, we actually get to use grenade launcher, rocket launcher, and Gauss cannon on it. Warhead really lets loose with firearms, providing all the most fun toys for all of the most fun fights. It's awesome. Defeating this enemy, Psycho and Eagle Team move further into enemy territory, continuing to chase Colonel Lee. The level that follows is an upgrade on the frozen ship from Crysis. This time it's a completely frozen aircraft carrier. It honestly looks breathtaking even now, in 2024. With Warhead's increased color vibrancy, this area is easily one of the most stunning places in the franchise. And as a level, it works incredibly well. It has verticality, is interesting to explore with weapon caches and enemies scattered through, and while the inside of the ship isn't all too impressive, it's still visually appealing, especially the ice-filled corridors, where translucent ice effects really demonstrate the true power of CryEngine 2 and what it can do when applied properly. This ship also features a decent jump scare. As you progress through the ship, you see flash frozen humans everywhere. You can even shatter them by shooting or simply walking into them. There are so many of them around you just naturally get used to it. But then you drop down to the ship's kitchen area. Standing around are a bunch of frozen soldiers, but the second you get close, they come alive and it turns out they're actually Korean nanosuits. It's fun when you know it's coming. But playing this for the first time, this moment is completely unexpected and takes you by surprise. Easily one of the only scares in the entire franchise, but it's great in both setup and execution. Past the ship, Psycho traverses a pretty impressive terrain with fissures and cracks in the ice, and Koreans fighting aliens everywhere. It's actually pretty fun, since this region looks incredible, and with luck you can actually stealth your way past the enemies, even if fighting them is faster. Again, at least you're presented with some options here, which is always good. The massive frozen ocean waves are especially impressive and look really cool. This region ends with short, but really beautiful ice caves that radiate cold even through the screen. Translucent ice walls and snow carried by winds create an incredible atmosphere of frost and cold like very few games have managed to do. What awaits at the end of the caves is another alien nanosuit, except this time we don't need to fight it, and Psycho can simply run away like a true hero. Further down the path, there's a Ceph-occupied mining complex, an entrance to the mine Psycho needs to go through. Eagle Team is here, providing support to Psycho again, and takes part in a defense section. Korean nanosuits are replaced by aliens, both flying and ground units. This section is nothing special, but it's fun and the constant intense action is really enjoyable. Ceph encountered here feel much more powerful than in original Crysis, and this is where their increased health pool is especially noticeable, but it's also where it gets a bit ridiculous. While regular flying Ceph take 5 Gauss shots to kill, the transport Cephs might as well be completely immortal. I guess it's a mechanic to ensure they are able to drop off the land units they're carrying instead of getting destroyed, but visually they look identical to regular flying Ceph, and because it's never even implied they are different, most likely player will sink all their ammo into them, leaving basically nothing to fight regular Ceph. It's not a massive problem, But on harder difficulties, where enemies deal much more damage, there's often just not enough time to gather all the ammo expended on the transport Ceph. At least Eagle Team is here and provides pretty decent support. They deal decent damage, are able to kill multiple Ceph on their own, and when another alien exosuit attacks, they sacrifice themselves and hold off attacking waves of aliens so Psycho could proceed further down into the mines. They're true Chads of Crysis. The mines, however, are easily the worst part of Warhead. They're dark and confined, filled with Koreans, and ugly as hell. There's nothing to explore. They're very linear and very, very boring. Literally, the only good thing about the caves is that they precede probably the best level in Warhead. But still, the caves suck. They're not helped by the fact minimap doesn't work here, and there's no objective marker, so while getting lost is unlikely due to linear nature of the level, not having an objective on minimap makes progress even slower than it otherwise could have been. Also, these mines are full of blind spots and corners and lots of Koreans with shotguns, so if you're particularly unlucky or play on harder difficulties, you might get wrecked by a bunch of enemies before you can even see them. So you know, that's pretty annoying the first time it happens, and completely infuriating if you get stuck at the same spot for like 10 retries. But eventually caves end, and train level starts. This is easily the greatest level in Warhead, and probably one of the best levels in Crysis franchise in general. The train is transporting the alien container Psycho has been chasing all along, but it's also a moving fortress and a huge target. There's a bunch of enemies on the train, but there's also turrets, miniguns, mounted grenade launchers, and for a decent chunk of time, there's stupid amount of targets to shoot all this firepower at. Koreans are absolutely relentless and attack the train with soldiers, cars, helicopters, armored transports, and everything but the kitchen sink. And considering there's literally no cover around turrets, you're constantly presented with a choice: lay low in invisibility mode, but have enemies constantly attack you, or go on the offensive and use a turret, but risk dying from enemy fire. Incredible vehicle explosions, unlimited turret ammo, and massive onslaught of both mobile KPA forces, and constant checkpoints along the way turn this part into the hardest, but also the most dynamic section of the game. Highly enjoyable and extremely fun. At some point, O'Neill joins the fight in his VTOL, shooting enemies and supporting Psycho, and it's all really fun. Train shortly stops at an enemy base, and with O'Neill's help, Psycho has to clear it out, while Train can't really leave until Psycho gets to the objective and triggers a script. Player initially doesn't know that, and it creates some incredible tension during this mission. Possibility of Train suddenly leaving while Psycho is away fighting enemies creates a real feeling of urgency and danger, and it's glorious. After Psycho gets to the objective, Train actually starts to move, so Psycho has to catch up and get on it before it leaves. It's really easy, and the only danger to missing the train is having to reload a checkpoint, but just the very fact you can miss that train provides pretty cool adrenaline rush and really elevates this part of the mission from just regular whatever shootout to high-octane Hollywood blockbuster scene. What follows the forced stop is another section of mobile train defense, but this time, enemies not only have regular vehicles, but they also have trucks and even their own train. You can shoot enemies on the train, you can jump to it and bring the combat to close range, or you can hide somewhere and wait it out. While it's not a massive selection of options, it's still nice to have a freedom of choice. Eventually, the train leaves KPA territory and drives through a swamp where it mysteriously stops. O'Neill leaves a short time before this, and the Ceph alien container at the start is acting up. Psycho is alone here, with lots of firepower, but alone nonetheless. A laser beam from clouds shoots into the container, and mountains surrounding the train start to shatter and fall apart. Ground shakes, there are mysterious alien noises in the air, and things go flying. All of this creates incredible tension, probably for the first time ever in a Crysis game. Just the fact Psycho is alone, and nobody is going to help, is excellent fuel for anxiety. Of course, almost immediately the alien assault starts, and anxiety of the unknown is replaced by frantic bursts of panic when you're attacked on all sides by the tyranny of evil aliens. This section isn't as hard as it seems to be at first glance, since Psycho has mounted guns available, and most of the Ceph focus on container rather than Psycho himself. But still, this is a pretty intense action sequence with a high chance of death, especially on higher difficulties. You're attacked by both flying and land aliens, and shield aliens are here too, just to spice things up a little. This section isn't very long, But man, it's fun as hell, and in general, the train part is extremely fun. There's a reason why at one point in time every game had its own train section, because these are extremely fun and enjoyable when done right, and Crysis Warhead does train better than the absolute majority of all games. Sadly, the train ends real soon after the last defense, and we're in the final stretch now. All that remains is Psycho's solo assault on the heavily fortified KPA airport. This is another high-octane action-packed mission, although not as enjoyable as Train. Airport is really large and open, with lots of objects scattered about in an entire army of enemies to deal with. Regular soldiers, tanks, and later aliens attack constantly, and objectives are scattered around the entire airport, so tension is always high and danger is always present. Finding the container, Psycho is informed that an alien ice sphere interferes with communications, so in order to fly the container out he has to guide transport VTOL manually. So Psycho has to go to a radio tower at the end of the airport to do so, which means fighting through several tanks and a bunch of KPA soldiers. Of course, nothing in life is simple, and the VTOL refuses to come. In addition to that, alien hordes attack, this time with massive flying ship and a roided-out alien exosuit. But as the luck would have it, a nearby crashed plane was carrying some new experimental weapon, the Pax Cannon. This is the most powerful weapon in the game, able to one-shot flying aliens, and is the only way to destroy the exosuit. What follows is an intense, but actually pretty boring fight, consisting of shooting at alien, dodging behind cover, waiting for gun to recharge, popping out to shoot, then hiding again, and you just do that until alien is dead. It's really basic, it's really boring, and it's really bland for a boss fight. The only interesting thing that can happen is the exosuit grabbing Psycho and throwing him into the air, but even that doesn't do much at this point. Spamming superheated explosive plasma shots at exosuit eventually makes it go down, however, ending this weak sauce fight. Following that, we get a really lame cutscene where Colonel Lee supposedly gets wrecked by aliens, and the game ends. Man, what a ride. Warhead feels like across-the-board improvement over Crysis in action, visuals, gameplay, and pacing, but it follows the same game style, with strong start, decent middle, one really awesome mission almost at the end, and a disappointing finale. You can tell how much Crytek learned about game design since Crysis, but honestly, most of the mistakes made in original are still present in Warhead. It's just so short most of the stuff doesn't have enough time to get to you. Seriously, Crysis Warhead is pathetically short. All of Psycho's adventures take only about 2.5 hours, or even faster if you don't die, nowhere to go, or just skip all the cutscenes. Original Crysis was already a short game, taking maybe 5 or 6 hours to beat if you don't die, or simply play on easier difficulty, but Warhead takes it to a whole new level. Seriously. You can probably beat Warhead faster than it takes to play 2 or 3 decent League of Legends matches, carried over from original game. Stuff like floating textures, buggy guns, plot holes, and underdeveloped ideas are also all still here, but so is breakneck action, intense firefights, excellent locations, much more interesting maps, and considerably more beautiful and vibrant graphics. All good aspects of the game combine to create an awesome experience over short duration, and where original Crysis got boring in some places, some levels dragged on way too much, and bursts of intense and enjoyable action were spread across large and almost empty maps, Warhead offers condensed, improved, and much more enjoyable Crysis experience than Crysis itself. But there is one thing that's keeping Warhead down, an area where this overall improved game falls incredibly short of even the original game: cutscenes. In the original Crysis, cutscenes were actually pretty awesome. It was always from first person, so it was quite immersive, and with Crysis having been in development for years, and it being the forefront title for CryEngine 2, cutscenes were meticulously directed and decently well written, and it always looked great. Of course, none of the cutscenes were world-class, even for the time, but they were all good enough to keep you in the game, and none of them were cringe-inducing or outright bad, even if at times they struggled a bit, especially with the plot. But in Warhead, cutscenes are hilariously bad. They're so badly directed, it feels like they came from an entirely different game. Dialogue is cringe at best, nonsensical at worst. Consistency is non-existent. There's really random and weird cuts everywhere, and almost every cutscene looks like it was directed by some 11-year-old in a way he thought was cool. Also, it feels like every single cutscene is trying to create a narrative of Psycho being this tragic war veteran-type hero with his own set of morals, jaded by war, and the things he's forced to witness, which clashes directly with how he's portrayed in the first game, and even in Warhead during various conversations with different people during missions. In Crysis, Psycho is there to break up the tension that Prophet usually brings, and while he's not exactly a comic relief and is actually quite serious, Psycho is considerably more easygoing than the rest of the squad. He's never portrayed as someone with some weird tragic backstory. He's never implied to be brooding or vengeful. He's just a man doing his job, sometimes more serious, sometimes less, and the only thing setting him apart from the rest of his team is the fact he's asking more questions than them and has doubts about the whole situation. In Warhead, all of that goes out the window. The first cutscene portrays Psycho as this badass mega soldier, but every cutscene after that tries to bend the narrative regardless of what actually happens in the game. For example, in a cutscene that plays immediately after Psycho rescues O'Neill, they manage to ambush a Korean soldier and knock him down. But while O'Neill is getting ready to kill him right then and there, Psycho stops him. According to Psycho's morals, he can't kill an unarmed soldier in cold blood, and that sounds noble and everything, but literally 60 seconds earlier Psycho was mowing down entire battalions of enemy forces without a single regard towards their lives. Literally the only difference is that they were armed while this lone soldier is not. And it's not like Psycho even expresses any regret about killing so many people either. The contrast between what's acceptable in his mind and what's not is really jarring and goofy. Later, when Psycho fails to be stealthy, gets knocked out by EMP and gets captured by KPA, we get probably one of the worst cutscenes of 21st century. Psycho tries to be a smartass, then Colonel Lee appears, looking like the world's poorest millionaire, sporting awful glasses and no helmet, and tortures Psycho. Audio mixing is non-existent. Despite Psycho supposedly experiencing unbearable pain, you'd at least expect him to scream or for there to be some electric crackling or something. But there's none of that. I guess torture is just so silent. Also, there's this random shot of two Korean dudes looking around, and it's the goofiest shit ever. But that's not even the worst cutscene. Not even close. At the end of the train level, we get a dose of such incredible cringe, it might give someone a whiplash. So Psycho is arming some explosives around the bridge to blow it up and the alien container along with it. O'Neill is nowhere to be found, so Psycho is here alone. Suddenly, Korean chopper comes out of literally nowhere, carrying Colonel Lee. I guess it's a stealth chopper or something, since it manages to sneak up on Psycho somehow. We get this really goofy shot of Psycho staring down Lee, and Lee spits out some cool boy sounding stuff while Psycho tries to act tough or something. Anyway, Psycho taunts Lee, then acts surprised when Lee actually jumps out of the helicopter and squares up to him. Lee then reveals he's captured some random American soldier. Like, who the heck is this guy? He's not O'Neill. And O'Neill is literally the only person in this game Psycho cares about. So who's this random dude? Anyway, Lee orders his soldiers to throw the American out of the chopper, and we get stupendously lame slow-motion shot of him falling and Psycho jumping after him. Of course, in classic action movie style, Psycho catches him, but drops the detonator. What follows is a good minute of Psycho struggling to hold the Marine and reach the detonator. Like, dude, you've got strength mode that you used literally like 10 seconds ago. Just use that and you can pull yourself up along with the Marine with one hand. But I guess Psycho just turns his dumb Goku mode here and completely forgets about that. Anyway, some nonsense struggling later, and even after Marine himself tells Psycho to drop him and get the detonator, Psycho finally relents, promises the soldier that he'll survive, drops him, grabs detonator, falls himself, but blows the train up in the meantime. Of course, it doesn't matter at this point, as Psycho took so long to do anything. Lee already left with the alien container. This whole scene is meant to be this epic movie cliche, or whatever, but man, let me tell you, it sucks all the balls at once. It's just so unbelievably lame. Also, later in the same cutscene or even in the game, you can see the bridge isn't even all that tall, and it's over the water. I could survive that fall, and I'm a fat gamer who has lifted weights like 3 times in my whole life. Are you seriously trying to tell this bridge above water would poses even a slight danger to trained soldier? Sure, maybe he'd break a leg if he fell awkwardly, but he's falling a maximum of like 10 meters into decent amount of water. It would hurt like a bitch, But dude, you can survive that pretty easily, so this whole setup is some serious bullshit. But anyway, the Marine dies, and despite Psycho's heroic efforts to revive him, he fails. So Psycho is totally in rebel mode now, and he goes after the surviving Korean. So the Korean, who also somehow lost his helmet by the way, starts shooting Psycho. Of course, that doesn't do jack, since nobody in this game can aim. But this is hilarious. Like, dude, shoot Psycho's face. He's literally not even defending himself, and he's coming closer to you. It's the perfect target. Just aim, and with one bullet it'll be done. But of course, he doesn't kill Psycho. And instead, Psycho drowns him in like 10 seconds flat in maybe 10 centimeters of water. Sure, seems legit. That's exactly how drowning works, don't you know? And then Psycho just sits around crying or something. Like, what the heck is even happening? This cutscene is so cringe, it's hard to even explain in words. Directing is piss poor. Weird zooms, cuts and angles are everywhere, and it's cringe as hell. But then we've got the last cutscene, the creme de la creme. Psycho is getting ready to transport the alien container, and O'Neill heroically returns to carry it, and Psycho home. Of course, there's an unexpected twist, and Psycho goes stealth while General Lee manages to sneak up on O'Neill along with his nano soldiers. Man, these dudes are just masters of sneaking. Lee tries to shoot O'Neill, but Psycho prevents that. A short, incredibly boring and choppy as hell fist fight follows, with Lee using his electric shock device to attack Psycho, who is now immune to electricity, I guess, and just shakes it off. So Psycho manages to beat Lee, throws him out, and leaves him for incoming aliens. And Lee just stands there like a complete dork with his shocker in hand, and presumably gets blown up by aliens while Psycho flies away happy. That's right, main bad guy of the game, the absolute villain of the story, the most evil person on the island, gets killed by aliens in a cringe-inducing cutscene. At least original Crysis let the bad guy get killed in-game by Nomad, but here, Lee is not given even that courtesy, so it's pure piss show. And here we have it. Crysis Warhead. It's such a weird game. Lots of stellar ideas, massively improved action, better visuals, much more enjoyable gameplay, but considerably shorter duration, much worse story than in original Crysis, and absolute cringe fest that are cutscenes. Once again, it feels this could have been so much more if only Crytek invested just slightly more money and time into it. It could have been truly great. But no, what we got was good, almost great, and a lot maximimer game than Crysis, but it's like a warm beer on hot summer's day. You tell yourself you like it, but you know it's flawed as hell. But what do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Also, like, share, and subscribe for more content.